You will never forget his name. I don't care if I have to march alone. I don't care if I have to walk from here to Washington, D.C. and say his name to every person that I come across. His life mattered as a person. And so does each and every child, each and every male and female who was stolen from us. This has to stop. We need to stop it, change it, and redo it now. Playtime's over. Too many lives.
Welcome to Unmuted, a powerful conversation where no topics are off limits and no voices are muted. Yahoo Live amplifies the voices of Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And in today's episode, we focus on Stephon Clark's wrongful death at the hands of law enforcement. Hello, I'm Tatiana Pile. Joining us today, we have some prominent Black figures in the community. We have Stephon Clark, who is an activist and mother of Stephon Clark, Chelsea Miller, activist and co-founder of the Freedom March of NYC, and Marquise, a national reporter and producer for Yahoo. In 2018, Stephon Clark was shot and killed in the backyard of his grandmother's house by two Sacramento police officers. He was 22 years old, unarmed, with just a phone in his hand. This is one of the many incidents of Black men and women who have suffered at the hands of law enforcement. Before we begin our conversation, let's hear Stephon's story through this PSA spearheaded by Roc Nation and the NFL.
Stephon is textbook middle child. He is an overachiever. Like when he played football, he's the one who picks the team spirit back up. Stephon is so charismatic. He's the life of the party. You would know that he's an honor roll student. He's such an awesome father. It makes me proud. My family will never be the same without Stephon.
Clark was shot 8 times in his grandmother's backyard. Officers mistook his cell phone for a gun.
That night, his friends dropped him off, and from crossing the street, the neighbor starts chasing him with a bat, thinking he's the one who broke into his car window. He's scared, but he made it home. He's thinking safe, but he wasn't. What the world lost was a living example of someone doing the right thing in their day-to-day life. The passing of the bill AB 392 with the Stephon Clark law for California will prevent other mothers from having to go through what I did with my son. And that's the ultimate goal, to make change. The fact that the dialogue of what needs to be done different is here now, is hope now. I am Stephon Alonzo Clark, but I am Sacramento too. This is my home, and we will have change here.
Change is being made by Stephon Clark's family, but justice still has not been served. While families wait for justice and accountability by the police, what can we do now to spark change? Sequette, I'm gonna start off with you because this story hits extremely close to home with Stephon being your son. How has your activism and advocacy changed because of this tragedy?
I think my activism went just as far as the community. Today, I've become a voice of the mothers. I've become a voice of the tragedies that have taken place. Now, since Stephon was killed, that has reached out and branched out nationwide. I've become a mother of the movement, which is spearheaded by the National Action Network. I've spoken all over the nation. My family just was with the Floyd family, with the Jacob Blake family at the March on Washington. So now my voice is heard in places that I've never been. You know,
we have to march and stand and sit and speak. We have to take action. We will defeat systemic racism. We will defeat police terrorism. We will defeat every social injustice that continues to enslave us.
In Sacramento, what we're doing, we have the I Am SAC Foundation, which is the I Am Stephon Alonzo Clark Foundation. Our logo's in the back. That's our city line. And the city went upside down after Stephon was killed. And so by the officers not being charged, we had to come up with something to protect ourselves. So we've just come to the point where we want to do our own. We want to have our de-escalation teams, and that way we're able to feel safe.
And again, I just want to commend you and applaud you on the work you've done, and just to applaud your resilience and your strength. And we need more people like you in our community. Chelsea, I'm going to start with you because you just gave an impassioned speech at the March on Washington. which was extremely powerful and showed the energy that is currently driving the change so many of us want to see.
And so we may be young, but we are a force. We may be young, but we stand on the shoulders of giants. We may be young, but we are organized and we are strategized, and we will show up in November to the polls, and we will let them know that we are not going anywhere.
What do you think needs to change in order for Black Lives Matter movement to be considered effective?
First and foremost, definitely want to give space for the fact that when we talk about these issues, we are talking about real people. We are talking about real families. We are talking about mothers who have been impacted by this, but we tend to dehumanize the very fact that when we talk about these hashtags, like we're talking about children, right? We're talking about the sons and daughters. And I think for me, when we talk about doing this work specifically, you know, a lot of people say, young people are driving this movement, young people are driving this movement. Yes, that may be true, but I think that we are all aware of the fact that this movement has been going on for decades, and truth be told, the issue of Black lives and what it means to be a Black body in this country is an untold story of over 400 years that we are still currently trying to shape. And so for us, when we think about policies, it's really about reimagining systems that initially weren't even designed to serve us in the first place, in a way that ensures that we are humanizing communities and that we are ensuring that this very democracy that we talk about is applicable to everyone, because we know even our criminal justice system was initially created as a slave-catching institution. So how can we expect an organization and an infrastructure that was initially created to catch slaves to somehow then be able to protect people, right? So I think there's just a lot of intersecting conversations that need to be had around what this movement looks like and what substantive policy change looks like. And so when we think about Freedom March NYC, we really came about during the May 31st weekend, the initial uprisings that happened during the George Floyd protests, and recognizing that more young people needed to make sure that we were on the ground centering the message of this movement, which wasn't about looting and rioting. It was about justice for Black lives.
And Marquise, I'm going to bring you into the conversation. As a reporter covering the upcoming election in such a pivotal moment in American history, what are some of the things our current politicians can do on the Hill to help propel the fight for racial equality?
When we look at things like qualified immunity, judicially, it was created so that it shields government officials from being held personally liable for constitutional violations. And when it comes to Stephon Clark, the two officers that shot and killed him continued to work after it. I think it starts on the federal level, obviously making body cameras mandatory for everyone. We saw once again in this Stephon Clark's case, the audio was turned off. Also, there needs to be a national use of force standard. One of the things that did come out of this was the Stephon Clark law in California, where police officers in the states would be required to use lethal force only as, quote, necessary. And then also, I just think it's super important for data collection and accountability. You know, I think too often police officers and even entire police forces, we're seeing what's happening in Kenosha right now. If you watch these daily press conferences, you're seeing really how incompetent a lot of these police forces are. People aren't being held accountable, and the police force there has had a number of issues over the past few years. So I think as citizens, obviously, it's important for us to, vote in people who are going to make these changes and hold politicians accountable. But across the board, it's important not only to say Black Lives Matter, but to show Black Lives Matter by instituting some of these changes.
I think one of the most important things that you touched on was accountability. As we all know, policing is a job that requires training, and it's a job that requires a lot of systems to be dismantled as far as racism and prejudice and discrimination. What do you think as far as policies or as far as we as a community can do to hold these police accountable, to make people feel that when we see a police in our neighborhood, that we know that we will be treated equally and fairly, and it's not going to result in a death or shooting?
Legislative change is very important. We believe that holding not only the police, but the government in our city responsible. Marquise touched on the body cams. The sheriffs in our city they don't wear body cams. They refuse to, and they're their own entity. And so when you look at things like holding the police accountable, we're talking about the police, which is held accountable by the city officials. However, the sheriffs, which are in every city as well, are not. They are their own entity, and they do not answer to anyone. And so even with the Stephon Clark law, that bill amended a law that had been in effect since 1872. Okay, so that goes to show, what we're dealing with in our system. The law has been in effect since January. I stood next to Governor Newsom as he signed that bill into law in August of 2019. And so it became effective January 1st. And there has been multiple killings by police officers in California since January 1st, but only one has been brought to charges. And so we're doing that now as well at the foundation. We're collecting our own data so that we can come to our city council meetings, so that we can go to the state, to the Capitol and say, hey, what's going on? There's something that needs to be done about this. Until everyone questions the injustices, we will not have change. We have to do it all right now, all collectively, in order for it to make the impact that we desire.
It should never be on the job of the oppressed to fix the problem. And it's remarkable to hear you, Mama Clark, talk about the work that you're doing, but it's just like frightening to think that you lost your son and you're doing all this work, right? And I think it's not just about numbers, it's not just about statistics, but these are real lives and you're making real change. I mean, obviously, when it comes to community policing, I think ideally police officers will be from the communities in which they do patrol. I think it's harder to arrest or shoot and kill, your neighbor or your homeboy up the block versus someone where you're coming into that community knowing nothing. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done. I mean, if you walk around, I live in Harlem, New York. If you walk around Harlem, New York, there's a lot of white police officers. There's some white people in Harlem, but it's not that many, right? And I think that's the case for a lot of cities all over the country. And I think there's been a lot of debate over disbanding police departments all over the country and, pros and cons of it. But I do know in Camden, New Jersey, there's precedent to showing that it works. I know in 2013, they also disbanded the police department there. And in 2012, they had 65 excessive force complaints. Flash forward to 2018, and they were down to 3.
Wow.
And this is just them injecting more community policing into their system. And most recently, the police chief asked the organizer of a Black Lives Matter rally, could he actually walk with them? To see a white police officer chief walking with the Black Lives Matter movement is really powerful. And that image goes a long way. Obviously, there's more work that needs to be done. It should not just be a photo op, but it is imperative on both sides to really come together, to reach across the aisle and pull them as we pull them up.
Chelsea, a part of your speech that really resonated with me during the March on Washington is that you mentioned that John Lewis was the same age as you when he began protesting. What do you think are some small things that the younger generation can do to get involved into this movement?
When I think about the fact that John Lewis was 23 when he also spoke at the March on Washington, for me, it is a reminder that this is a marathon, not a sprint. And what we also say is that, yes, even though in a lot of ways we are fighting the same fight, we have to understand that the conditions look different and that there have been new systems that have been erected as a way to really stifle the gains that they made during the civil rights movement, the gains that we've made during the Obama administration. And so in that same way, we have to understand that the responsibility is on every single generation to continue to push forward this work. And so when we think about the importance of voting, when we think about the importance of showing up at the polls in November, we understand that voting isn't going to fix Black people's problems in America, because the truth is that there needs to be so much more that's done. But we understand that voting is a critical point, right, and system within the democracy that allows us to really show and put our voices together collectively to push forward that change. It's not enough for us to just have these laws. We also need to make sure that there are systems and there are accountability measures in place when police officers do not follow these laws. We've seen, especially the young generation, how our country has responded to COVID-19 being a pandemic. We've been able to reimagine systems because we've understood the severity of that crisis. In that same way, we need to understand racism as a pandemic within and of itself and rapidly respond to systems to ensure that we are addressing that, right? And we're not looking for Band-Aid solutions to these very systemic issues. We are looking for surgical solutions to these surgical issues. I think a lot of times we get tired, the cameras turn off, the media stops paying attention, and we forget that this movement is still continuing. And I think that it's really about using your gifts, like Mama Clark said, to make sure that you are doing this work and contributing to this work, because this is more than a moment. It is a movement movement, and it really is on us to make sure that we are all coming together collectively for that.
I know your parents must be so proud of you. Stephon was 22, you know, and oh God. You know, these types of interviews, I know how impactful they are, which is why I do them, but they are very true. We are in a pandemic, and not just from coronavirus. The state of our nation is in a pandemic. It's just, you know, I remember when Trayvon Martin was killed, and I remember my sons and I, Stephon, myself, Devontae, Jalen, I remember us marching in Sacramento. I remember that, but I remember how it fizzled out. I remember how after maybe 3 to 6 months, you know, it was rare to hear Trayvon's name. And that's what I did when Stephon was killed. That's what I said would not ever happen. You will never forget his name. I don't care if I have to march alone. I don't care if I have to walk from here to Washington, D.C. and say his name to every person that I come across. His life mattered as a person, just as my son, his life mattered. And so does each and every child, each and every male and female who was taken, stolen from us. This has to stop. I mean, 1872 was the last time the use of excessive force law was changed. You know, the timing when it was made, I think, you know, what you said about us needing to attack this situation now surgically is so on point that it moved me. If everyone who is dealing with this situation, if everyone who has a platform said no, just like coronavirus 19, this is coronavirus 20, you know, what's up? Like, stop it, change it, redo it now. We need to stop it, change it, and redo it now. Playtime's over. Too many lives. To that march on Washington, all of those families. These are real lives. All of those families. I looked at, and so I was researching for the March on Washington, and I knew that it was going to be so impactful. I'm sorry for crying.
It's
fine. I researched Emmett Till because that's how the first March on Washington came about. Martin Luther King and the NAACP, they hopped on with another man who was doing a march for the workers' rights, right? And they decided to come together. And when I looked at the story of Emmett Till's mother and how she allowed her son's casket to be open to see how his face was disfigured. And then I think about my son, you know, that's too many years. That's too many lives. It's enough is enough. Enough is enough. And I just applaud everyone on here, you know, just for standing up. Chelsea Miller, wow, like, baby, I'm proud to even be on this with you, okay? And you're a baby, and I'm so proud and touched and honored to be a part of your order right now, okay? And everyone, you guys are so young and so on fire, and I love it. And I'm old, but I'm on fire too with you. And I think that, man, just us four right now can get it started. I believe that change is here. I really, in my heart of hearts, I know. I was telling my daughter, I have a 9-year-old, and I was telling her, I said, you know, you're gonna tell your kids about this, Kaylin. I was telling her, you're gonna when you are married, you're gonna tell your kids that I was a part of the civil rights movement. And I just wanted to let you guys know, you guys are a part of the new civil rights movement, an active, actionable part of it. Do you know how much you are affecting history right now? I just need everyone to really reflect on that. You're Rosa Parks, you're Coretta Scott, you're Martin Luther. You know, I mean, you guys need to really, really grasp that, and we won't fizzle out.
I want to ask you, Sequette, because I'm sure this is a conversation that you've probably had with your daughter and your older son. As a parent who's suffered a loss at the hands of police and probably having other parents in your life, how do you share with them that there is still beauty in having children, having Black children, raising Black children in this world today?
I'm a mother of 8. I buried 3 children. I buried a daughter who lived for 10 minutes. And then my first son was murdered at 16 due to community violence. And then Stephon was murdered. And so unfortunately, I never grieved my first son. And so with Stephon, I went into a deep, dark depression. And I'm just now, for the first time in my life, in the last 15 years, coming up for air, experiencing true joy and laughter again. It's something that it's new for me. And so I find myself smiling all the time because I was so angry and so crushed for so many years that it is just, I never want to be that way again. I treasure my joy and my peace today. And so I smile a lot and I laugh.
Black joy is an act of resistance, okay? Black joy, it's okay to be happy.
For so many years, I thought that I would be a bad mother for not being happy. I mean, for being happy. I thought that if I moved on with my life, that I would be a bad mother, you know. And so with the help of 2 therapists, a psychiatrist, and some happy pills, I've come up for air. Well, but yeah, you know, so it just, you know, I'm a new creature. I'm a new creature right now, and it feels good. It's life, you know, it's life. It's everything that we do in this world. If you don't have anyone to share with or pass it down to, it fizzles out. That's the importance of legacy. Legacy means to pass it on, to pass it, you know. And so the beauty of having a child is that, because I'm a woman of faith, I believe that God entrusted me to take care of these little people of his, to teach them the way to be. And so I taught my children to stand up for when something's wrong. That's where Stephon stood up for his brother at. That's where I'm standing up for my son, you know, to believe in yourself and believe in your voice and know that this is my life and I will dictate what happens in it. You know, my he's not here anymore, but his name will live on forever. People are saying my son's name. The NFL just had offered us this helmet recognition program that they're doing. Stephon dreamed of playing in the NFL. No one knows that, you know? And so to know that his name will be on a helmet for an entire season, oh my God, that's just like a dream come true. I'm hopeful again. I'm hopeful at a time in my life where I thought I would be hopeless. You know, my thinking is optimistic. I believe in us making a change and making a difference. And it doesn't happen overnight, but it's every little thing that is done differently. And so I just want to encourage everyone that watches this to be a part of change, be a part of history, you know, find an actionable way to be a part of change.
Well, again, thank you guys so much. I appreciate everyone's perspective. I hope that whoever watches this feels empowered to get on the grounds, write letters, do whatever they feel is helpful to help progress this movement. Thank you for watching Unmuted, a powerful conversation where no topics are off limits and no voices are muted.